kick off this morning talking about elections. Yes, we've got, as you've seen in that welcoming slide, Mr. Akin Braithwaite, who is the ADC Governorship Aspirant in Lagos. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, what a time it is, I reckon, for you, your party in Lagos. As a matter of fact, I was reading some of the pieces you wrote, how for over 20 years, you ruled by a certain party. You want to make this change. You think it is time to make this change. But we know you know that you have a job on your hands, a task on your hands. But in the first place, if you could just give us in terms of why did you decide to take this plunge in the first place?
Thank you, and thanks for having me on the program. This happened to me, as happened to quite a number of people, in October 2020. I live on the Lekki axis, and just after the awful incident, which some have called a massacre, at least in the report, there was a big riot. And during that riot, our axis was really, really greatly affected. In fact, to the extent that some of the shops around that area are no longer open. So some people just went out of business. The youth, the explosion was unbelievable. So at that point, as we tend to do, there was all sorts of things going on WhatsApp, criticisms, viewpoints. And I just got to a point where, I said, it really would be remiss of me to sit here and just complain. And I felt, look, at the end of the day, we must do something. We must take some kind of action. And it was at that point that I decided, let's set up a new political party with some friends. And we actually made the attempt. And I was really, really serious about it. But we just couldn't get through the door. So we then decided, look, let's look for a party that at least shares our viewpoints and has some kind of ideology that resonates with what we want to see. And I then joined and signed up with the party ADC in October 2021. That's what got me involved.
There are 18 political parties as at today, and maybe as at that 2020 as well. You didn't think it was easier to join an existing political party at the time? You felt it was better to set up a brand new one?
Yes, because, we felt, let's come from an ideological standpoint. What's the ideology? What do we really want to, drive forward? And at that time, yes, one really didn't think that the next best thing to do was to go into existing, because why did they let the two, parties have pole position after all these years? So that was the thinking, really. But at the end of the day, reality is reality. It is what it is. So we eventually had to start to look at the other 16 and say which one out of the 16 can we essentially, move with. And we then chose one out of the 16.
So what is this ideology that you had in mind that does not exist in all of the existing parties?
I call it societism, which is an ideology that looks at society in its different clusters. We believe that you can't do a one-size-fits-all. You need to really, really take cognizance of the different social constructs. You have different people in the society, and you have to really be societal. Look at it from the prism that society stares back at you, and you say, okay, this group needs this particular type of solution. This group needs this approach. This group needs this sort of solution. And that's ideology also allows for individuals to create and make wealth. But it looks at society and the fact that you need to have a societal approach as well as, allow for that individual approach. And then there's a symbiotic relationship that goes on.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just ask, there have been so many issues in Nigeria for donkey years, as we say. Many people will be wondering, why you, why now? What have you done or said? How have you influenced anything over time to make you think I think I can actually get into office and make any significant difference. Why should Lagosians listen to you?
I like the way you put that. If you're a user of a mobile phone, you would have experienced part of what I did in society. I was one of the pioneer group that got involved in launching of GSM into Nigeria. And it was an enormous task. I don't know if you remember, you're perhaps too young, to remember those days when there were long queues, people trying to buy SIMs. People were breaking through shop windows, to get at the SIMs. SIMs were selling at about 25, 50,000, naira then. SIMs today are selling at, are not even selling at the price. In one of the organizations where I worked, which is now called Airtel, Celtel then, I was the general manager of the Southwest Zone, which included 6 states, Ondo, Osun, Ogun, Oyo, Ekiti, Kwara. And it was my job and responsibility to roll out the network in those states. And it involved going around, it involved geomarketing, it involved setting up customer touch points in all of those states. It involved going into the grassroots. I would go into the marketplace. We would do market storms to sell SIMs. I would dance in the market, try to understand what the grassroots folks wanted. We would do CSR. All of these things definitely equipped me for the job of running into this particular type of state. If I could do it in 6 states.
My sincere apologies, Mr. Braithwaite. But
yes.
the question, while that is valid, and there are quite a number of things in the ratings now. I mean, an NCC, for instance, will tell you that this particular organization you talked about has its place in the big four, so to speak, and it's definitely not number one, at least as of today. But there are many other issues that we've been talking about for donkey years. Security, power, and things that are peculiar to states, viability or otherwise of the states. So that's actually where I'm coming from. What is it that makes you think that the national issues, the statewide issues, the governance issues that are very serious and peculiar are not so much, maybe like 1,000 times bigger than the role of one director in a telco?
Okay, again, I will try to unpack it. When you have to roll out, you are involved in really trying to understand the forces and the issues of the particular state. And no one state is the same as the other. You have to deal with the authorities, you have to deal with issues of right of way, you have to deal with issues of timing, you have to deal with issues of how the project is going to effectively achieve what's going to be done. You have to be able to relate to the people on the ground. You have to talk to the obas, the chiefs, really ensure that they're with you, and they have to give you a lot of permissions and approvals. You've got to ensure that your CSR program really meets exactly what the people need. If these people need umbrellas here, you've got to make sure that that's exactly what's done for them. You've got to be able to sit down and listen to the people. Okay, you don't just kind of make assumptions. There was even a project where we rolled out and we asked people, where do you want the next base station? It was called Project Rose. And we actually allowed people to define and say, this is really what we want to do. In addition to that, you're dealing with security issues. Actually, I'm a trained spy police officer, so I understand the internal workings of the security apparatus, because we also needed to be able to relate, with and understand security. You don't just get into a role like that without having to take security concerns into play. Based on that, I would approach security, from a multifaceted approach. We would do a number of things which would ensure that the way it's made to seem now, it's not that difficult, to be honest with you. Security is almost like a natural reaction. If I want to hit you now, you take a move to defend yourself, right? So instinctively, we are security enabled. The fact that we are not getting it right, I think, is an attitudinal thing. And it's a question of just taking a step back.
Whose attitude this time around? My apologies.
The attitude of those who are in charge of putting across the security.
On a lighter note, just before Bookie comes in, I was going to say, so you're one of those spy police people who always harass us on this street, right?
I'm of a different ilk.
Spy police, so you're one of them.
I'm of a different ilk.
Okay, so
the attitude.
Well, even though the challenges of a mega city are more complex than, the experience, your background that you're putting out, I'd like to go back to your ideology of societism and tie it back to your plan to restore the lost glory of Lagos. Where are the threads of similarity? How do you plan to approach it?
Okay, so you've heard of the youth bulge. The youth bulge, if you think about a pregnant woman, okay, something has to happen at a particular point. Now, our society is facing what I would call an existential threat from this youth bulge, in the sense that it has to be born. You can't have so many youth who are unemployed and who are sleeping on the streets. Anger is really, really welling up. And we saw a foretaste of that when we had the riots in 2020. We have to do something about the youth. It's not even, there's no option but to take this and have some kind of a Marshall Plan around it. So our government really would take the youth thing and look at how do we scale employment? How do we really, really give the youth something to do that allows them to get some allowances? As I was coming to the studio today, I saw youth sleeping there's that long bridge also. Now, when those guys wake up, in the morning, when they wake up later, they're going to wake up angry, okay? And if they don't have any means of income, they're going to do something, they have to eat somehow. So a responsible government, a caring government, has to take that into account and has to be ready to say, what are we going to do, about this? And essentially, one of the things that we would do very quickly will be to use sports, all right? Sports as an income generator, sports as a means of a career. So you'll take as many youth as possible and place them into different sports engagements, all right? You've heard about the guy that's doing the stuff in Oshodi, underneath the bridge, the chess. He's teaching motor park boys how to play chess. And there's been some good dividends arising from that already. So you would take that kind of endeavor and you roll it out, in multiples. So that what then happens is that these folk can now develop careers. You can have careers in table tennis. So we would roll that out massively because that will definitely occupy a large number of youth. The second thing we would do is allow grants for youth to create some kind of SMEs. Then the government will get into a contract with those SMEs and make sure that we at least have a 1-year procurement contract. So those youth know that they're parts of a cottage industry chain. Mercedes-Benz, for example, a lot of the parts of Mercedes-Benz are made through cottage industries, families and what have you, because then that creates that supply chain, all across. We will bring out a campaign which we will call Made in Lagos, so that brings also the pride of Lagos out there. And what we will do is that we campaign to make sure that all the youth are in one form of endeavor, even if it's arts and crafts and whatever. Tourism will be rolled out massively because that's going to be a massive occupier of the youth. And in that sense too, that brings the pride. Let's clean Lagos up, because if we clean Lagos up, it's a tourist attraction, In some sense, a rubbish heap too could be a tourist attraction because people might say, we've never seen this kind of rubbish before. So if that's what we want to do, we take people to, is it Ojota, where they can go and see the massive, as a tourist thing. But seriously, we would look at tourism, as a means of creating lots of jobs. Agriculture would be another area where we would put the youth to work. We'll make it very, very nice.
Before you get into agriculture, I'm glad you talked about cleaning Lagos up. The metropolis is growing, the population is growing faster than infrastructure, and as a result, slums are springing up everywhere, but albeit with broken infrastructure, no roads and no facilities. How do you intend to transform Lagos, that aspect of Lagos?
Great. Do you know, you've heard of waste to wealth. It's real. It's very, very real. I own a farm, okay? At the end of the day, you can actually, you can take waste and you can create fertilizer out of the waste. So we would, again, using the youth, you gather all the waste and they begin to earn income straight away. This is not something that, oh, it's a pie in the sky, because it's already there. Every waste that you see all around us can be turned into income. So again, we will have these youth groups. They start clearing up the waste, okay? And then we will separate those wastes into and create productivity out of the waste. You can also bring out energy out of the waste. So that's an alternative form of energy. So in a matter of 6 months, you can actually begin to create alternative energy. At the same time, you're cleaning up the state. At the same time, you're generating income for those that you've got involved. Isn't that a wonderful, dimension?
Okay. Well, one way that I think one can also look at the same thing that you're talking about is the issue of governance. I mean, these youths are not just in Lagos State; they are in local governments. Just as you said, societism. I don't know if there is a place for this question in this societism you're talking about, but they are in pockets of places all over the state. They are in local governments. They are in wards. And one thing so many people have been complaining, we had this conversation about local governments earlier, that so many people have been complaining about all over the country is that local governments are not as functional as they can be, or as they should be, as the Constitution proposes, in which, of course, some people are looking at it in a different direction. First of all, speaking from the constitutional perspective, what's your take on an autonomous local government system in Lagos, which perhaps might be useful to, expediting or catalyzing some of the things you're talking about?
Well, it's very interesting that we complain and we say we want restructuring. And within a state, the state doesn't want to devolve power, okay? So you have a comatose local government because the state is refusing to empower and it's seizing the income. So at the end of the day, we have to have local governance because the state is too large, to be managed centrally in any case. So practically, it doesn't make any sense to centralize and say, all power, belongs to us. So the local governance has to come into play. There's a role in the Constitution. They have to build roads. They've got to build the schools. They've got to supply the teachers. They've got to build healthcare and make sure that it's rolled out. Those are the functions of local governance. They've got to create the marketplaces. So anything that you see that is wrong and terrible, all the waste that you see all around there, it's a lack of involvement of local government. There's a job for them to do. 22 million people? How do you want to manage that from Alausa? You can't do that, and that's not what it's meant to do. And they're getting money directly from the federal allocation. What are they doing with the money? Local governments every year have an annual budget, and the citizenry need to ask them, but they're not accountable to the people. So our government will make them accountable. They have to work.
Do you think that the ADC has a support base to help you get there?
Most definitely, yes. We've just done congresses, and the congresses are essentially to bring about administration at local levels, at ward level. You mentioned the ward level. So all of these organs exist within the party.
So how do you deal with people who have been used to a certain kind of politicking and campaigning from these other politicians who, in many cases, if you approach them, they're either asking you for immediate gratification or they don't look your way, ideology or not? How do you relate with that?
Okay, so basically there are two sets of the polity. You have the voters, those who are actually voting, and principally are the guys who are responding to this kind of stimuli. Then you have the non-voters, of which there are about 70% of them. So we would actually be focusing on the non-voters to say there's something they're looking for that they're not getting, and that's what's not making them vote. Because the non-voting public who are already registered bearing in mind they actually went through the process of registration, have voters' cards, but have decided they're not going to use the voters' cards because they don't see a reason why they should. And one of the principal reasons is that they don't accept those that are being offered to them to vote for. Once you change that particular dimension and you offer them someone like me, then you have a different situation. They're not stimulated by, by graft. So they're stimulated by things other than that, by a higher consideration. Even the masses are not voting for these people. Even the masses that I've interviewed people, and you can take me up on this, because you've got the capacity to do so. You can talk to some of the masses who are receiving these things, and they're still not voting. So it's a dangerous thing for these guys to think that they're going to just be giving things out there, and they're going to get masses to vote for them. It's a dangerous gambit they're playing.
There's so many dynamics to this, which we'd love to explore. But I guess we'll have to do that another time, because we're completely out of time. Time flies, I know. And
when you're having fun.
I'm hoping not to be one of that 70%, because I have registered. I'm good to go.
Right.
But I think eventually we'll see how that plays out.
We'll give you the reason. It's sitting right in front of you.
But thank you for coming on, Mr. Akin Braithwaite, the governorship candidate, aspirant of the ADC in Lagos. They're having the primaries soon. Thank you for coming on, and all the best.
Thank you.